I am so excited to be here. I feel like, and it's kind of a good 1-2 punch with John to follow up. We're going to start with housing, now we're going to talk about food. Yeah, and it's so inspiring. So thank you for having us. Indeed, I'm going to talk about Curious Catalyst a little bit, which is my company, but by way of two specific things and how we as citizens can have impact in our communities, take on power. And we're going to talk about empathy and complexity and what that means. But first, of course, is what exactly the hell is a Curious Catalyst? I'm sure you all have plenty of ideas, but fundamentally it's me, and that's why it's turned into my company. This was me as a little kid, and as I was introduced, both of my parents are rocket scientists, sort of. One of them, my dad, is a theoretical astrophysicist, but he's really happy just thinking about things. So he never publishes what he does. He literally just sits around and doodles and noodles, and like he's really happy doing that. My mom, on the other hand, was raised in a communist country where if you don't work, nothing is meaningful. And if she doesn't publish, if she doesn't turn things into things, then she feels like her research physics is not worth anything. So she works for the Department of Transportation. And I really felt like both of those things are great on their own, sort of, but they work much better when they're combined. So this idea of investigating, digging into things, asking questions, and then turning it into something is really important to me. And that's something I've done all my life. This was me in the Amazon. We grew up traveling a lot. My parents were also kind of like Indiana Jones couple. We did archaeoastronomy and all kinds of different stuff. And I learned really early how to communicate across cultures because I had to. I only spoke English. We're American, sort of. So, you know, in this case, I was using bubbles as a way to bridge the language divide. And this was a culture, it's really and truly, we went down the Amazon River from one end to the other, and this is a really small village. But still, you realize there are universals, and it doesn't matter where you're from. It doesn't matter how different the place is that you've grown up or the experience. There are things at your core that you can share with any other human if you take the time to figure out what that is. And I got really interested in that idea of how cultures related to each other. And after many years of social psychology and doing theater and film and storytelling and all of these things which somehow related to our human experience, I ended up in this probably somewhat similar cubicle to what many of you have experienced. And I spent a lot of years in a cubicle like this. In this case, it was at a digital agency, but the point was that we were doing all this stuff and we talked about user experience, right? But there are no users. Like you sit in a cubicle and you I don't know what you think about who's out there using your stuff, but there's no human contact. That was really missing for me. And I just felt increasingly like I was working on marketing campaigns where we described statistics about the persona of who we were targeting. And literally, we actually did work for Oprah. We redesigned her website a few years ago. You know, but yeah, we never met Oprah. We never met the users. We just, you know, showed up and did some digital stuff. And so I was kind of really, I hit that point that's been mentioned a lot in terms of when your journey changes, where I was just waking up every day sort of miserable, like, what am I doing? Technology is happening all around me, and this should be exciting, but I just couldn't face it. And I was sitting at work, not working, looking at a website with news about, I don't know, business trends. And I read about these two crazy young guys, and I've mentioned them in the past couple of days, and they set up a company called Tribe Wanted. And this was in 2006, and the MySpace stuff was just starting to bubble. And they said, what could we do if we took an online social network and tried to really do something in the real world? So they actually charged for membership to this network. And if you paid to join, you could get to go to this island in Fiji that they rented, and you could vote on how to develop that sustainable tourism community. So I signed up, and next thing you know, I was in Fiji. Literally, the people at my office had a party for me because Survivor had just been shot in Fiji, and there were poisonous snakes, and they said, we hope you come back. So I said, I hope I come back too. I don't know what's gonna happen. There had just been a coup in the country, and there were travel advisories, but somehow I'd bought this ticket and I was gonna go. So I packed up an EXO laptop, which I thought I would bring, and we ended up having a very close relationship with the school. And you know, I'd say over the last 6 years, I've been to Fiji probably 6 times and spent about 4 months in total there, including a month when I was acting as the quote-unquote chief of this project as a liaison with the community. But what really got to me then was a mix of emotions about the potential of bringing a global group of people together to create change and bring new insights, but also the dangers of crowdsourcing urban planning. And all you have to do is ask me after this about the waterfall project or the new showers, and it's like the veins will start to come out. So that's been kind of a cautionary tale, and this is where I live. I went back to LA after all this time in Fiji, kind of going back and forth, and I was like, I'm gonna just quit my stupid digital job and go dig latrines, and that's what I should do. And I was dating a guy at the time who was smart enough to say to me, look, lots of people can only dig latrines, and you have had this really great opportunity in life, and you have a gift in terms of your knowledge of tech. How do you take that to do something meaningful? And I started to think about what that meant for Los Angeles and for enormous cities. This is not Los Angeles traffic, although many of you might think it is. This is Manila. And I started to work for an open source cloud computing company that was half based in Manila, because I thought, great, the developing world, I can have a hand there. And then I saw stuff like this, and I thought about, how this city of Manila, I should try to keep my stories to a minimum, but it's interesting, when the Spaniards took over, they built the city purposely with no straight roads to the capital so that it would be less likely for the peasants to revolt, right? Add 25 million people and a whole bunch of cars, and this is what you get every second of every day. And that's not even to start talking about the smog. This is Beijing, right? We know what pollution there is. This is what most days, I can talk louder, but I know this is not ideal. This is what most days in Beijing look like. The smog every day. And when I started to talk to an analyst about this when I was working on climate change, he said to me that Beijing's pollution is not Beijing's problem. It is our problem, actually, Vegas included. Anyone on the west coast of the US has to worry about this, because this is headed our way. So I started to think more and more, why are we only, sorry, thank you. I started to think more and more, why are we only solving problems in one specific place and not more than that? This is Indonesia, and this is, there's issues with access to water, clean water, and any water, as we know now on the West Coast, all over the place. And these are micro apartments in Hong Kong. There are tons of places where it's too expensive to afford to live. And this is what, honestly, people live in these things where they're living vertically, and that's your life. Four-person families live in these homes. So when I think about what's not working in the way we're developing cities and the way we're dealing with mega cities now, it's really that we're using old tools. So the way you used to build cities was you'd build them for 100,000 people or 1 million people, and you would spend 5-10 years developing them. I mean, John knows this as an architect. And it took a long time to build. So basically, it would take years and years for these things to change our cities. And generally, you would invest in them using taxpayer dollars, and then cities would say, like, this is our money, and we're not going to share these ideas. So what's happened in technology, and the reason that tech is advancing so quickly, is a couple of methods called Agile and Lean, which are really about rapid testing. You try something, you don't spend a lot of money. It's what Peter talked about yesterday with little bets. And you see what happens, and you learn. And the focus is on learning and not spending a lot of money and seeing what works, and then you replicate it. And what I want to do is I want to do those kinds of experiments in cities by engaging a whole bunch of different people and then sharing all those ideas out. Like, what is it that could work here in Vegas at the downtown project that could spread to a part of Los Angeles? If we have the same kind of context, the same kind of people living there, why wouldn't that work? And maybe something that works in New York, which is really dense, where you have multiple generations living in homes, that could work in Mexico City. So essentially, I'll skip, this is more about what we do, but I have a group of people who all come from emerging tech industries, and we kind of take design thinking and tech methodologies, and we all bring them to bear on urban challenges. The one danger I'll point out, though, I don't know how many people have seen this, but my point about empathy here is really that just because we can do certain things doesn't mean we should. And this is sort of what happens in the tech world when you get really excited and they're like, oh, virtual reality, great. And they try to bring that to bear. This is a solution, quote unquote, for the factory farming of chickens, where they said, oh, we can trick the chickens into thinking they're free range. And this will be the solution. We just keep them in the cages jammed in together, but they'll think they're outside. Like, that to me is where we go horribly awry in terms of our understanding of the real problem, right? So what I wanted to do actually, though, was give ourselves a challenge, and that was to start with something where an app could not fix it, and that would be food deserts. So for those who don't know, food deserts are areas where there's no access to fresh produce within a mile radius, and you have a primary population that has no access to transportation. So these are people who are getting most of their sustenance for their families at gas stations and 7-Elevens, which is, it's better than starving, right? But it's not ideal. And in terms of practical information, it means that this is why we are seeing that little girl is having dialysis. So in South Central LA, I'm gonna have to talk faster. In South Central LA, dialysis centers are spreading faster than fast food restaurants are, right? Because this is a huge problem and it's the result of not getting access to food. So when I talk about complexity and what that means, it doesn't mean it's complicated. It means that stuff is interconnected. So usually people say this is the problem in food deserts, that there's no access. Let's build supermarkets. Well, why isn't that happening? Because actually that's not the only problem. Cost is an issue. So lots of people have been saying, let's take school buses and go to farmers markets and drive that in. Well, that is not inexpensive. And then, oops, we're losing this, I see. Well, I'll keep talking. So things like how long does it take to prepare meals is another issue. And what if you don't know how to cook anymore? After 30 years of living in downtown Los Angeles, South Central, most people don't know how to cook. It's not a good or bad thing, it just is, right? Will the kids eat it? Yeah, we can talk about kale, salad, and quinoa all we want. If kids won't eat it, a busy mom is not gonna put that on the table. And lastly, who is making those decisions? Is it an older sibling? Is it really a mom? Is it a dad? Who is that, a grandma? So what I wanted to do is I really wanted to think about all of those issues and what could we do. And this is just one example, because we don't want to put mom and pops out of business either. But what if we took food trucks, newfangled food trucks, and we used a mix of produce from existing supermarket chains? Okay, they have huge supply chains and they can push costs down. They're about the only ones who have low enough cost that they can do this. And you say, let's put some fresh produce, let's put some prepared meals, and let's put some frozen meals on there. And let's go partner with mom and pop stores or the liquor stores and see if we can introduce new things. Will people eat them? And what you could do over time is you could even move the trucks out over time and just use them to drop off what's working at the mom and pop. So you add incremental revenue to those places. And now people know they have predictable sources of better food. And the supermarkets don't have to build an enormous fleet of trucks. So the point is, if you do something like that, you slowly over time figure out what works. You make the mom and pop store owners happy. You make the giant supermarket chains happy who right now are not, they can't add square footage anymore. They've squeezed the margins down. And you make families happier. So I don't know that the truck is the right answer, but the point is that this way of working is easy to test and it's something that we can play with. And when I think about complexity in all of these different pieces, this is how I like to work. This is like a roadmap with a whole bunch of roundabouts or rotaries, and the East Coast calls them rotaries, I think. And instead of driving a roadmap that takes 10 years to build in a city where you have this giant, enormous, inflexible project, you instead think about what are the most important things for us to test first. One of them might be, is taste more important than cost? I don't know, we can test that really easily. We can just do a little experiment. And then once you know, based off of that, you figure out what's the next thing you do. Like if it's taste, okay, do we need like gateway nutrition of some kind to get people hooked? And then you deal with distribution. But if that doesn't work, why would you bother? So the point really is that we need more than a method to test any of these things. We need to be in touch with the real needs. It can't just be like, oh, we'll fix it this way with some tech solution and we're not really paying attention. We need to think about the entire system. And that's something that we can do every day when we walk around. I ask a lot of questions and I stop and take photos on the sidewalk a lot. So when I'm walking around with friends, I was like, ah. But you know, you look at weird things that you see and like, oh, is that an opportunity? I don't know, someone's over there doing that. Like maybe we should go talk to that person. Those are things we can start to do. And here in Vegas, there is an incredible opportunity to do that and to connect that with the change that's possible through the downtown project. So I'm hoping that everyone will be able to join me really quickly in a last exercise if you'll just stand up for a second. And what we're gonna do is just point at the ceiling, straight up, and I want you to draw a circle clockwise. Everyone hopefully knows which way clockwise is. So just draw the circle clockwise. And then without lowering your, like don't point downwards, keep pointing at the ceiling. You're gonna lower your hand like this. Keep drawing the circle and just lower it down and look down. And what direction is the circle going? It's going the opposite way. Right? And the point of that is just that there are ways for us to change how we see the world without changing anything we're doing, just by changing how we look at it. So we have an incredible amount of power as citizens to just change the way we look at things. And I hope everyone will join me in doing that. Thank you.